Commander Rhea had served the Galactic Commerce Authority for 40 standard cycles. She had worked her way up from a simple customs inspector to one of the highest-ranking officers in the entire sector. Her species, were known for their sharp minds and their even sharper sense of order. Rules were sacred to them. Hierarchy was everything. And Rhea had spent her entire career making sure that everyone, regardless of species, understood their place in the grand scheme of galactic civilization. Station 9 was her domain. It sat at the intersection of three major trade routes, a massive structure that housed millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds. Ships came and went at all hours, carrying goods and passengers between the stars. Rhea's job was to ensure that everything moved smoothly, that every regulation was followed, that order was maintained. She had dealt with every kind of species the galaxy had to offer: peaceful traders, aggressive warriors, cunning merchants, and simple travelers. She had learned to read them all, to understand their customs, to know how far she could push, and when she needed to step back. Most species understood power when they saw it. They understood that the Commerce Authority had the backing of the Galactic Council, and that crossing an officer like Rhea was a very bad idea. But there was one species she had never quite figured out: humans. They were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely a century into interstellar travel. There was classified as a Category 7 death world, which meant that by all logic, intelligent life should never have evolved there at all. The planet was a nightmare of extreme temperatures, violent weather, toxic plants, and predatory animals. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived there was something of a mystery to across the galaxy. Rhea had read the reports about humans. She knew they were tougher than they looked. She knew their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill most other species. She knew they could survive on almost any kind of food, breathe air that would poison others, and function in temperatures that would leave other beings dead within minutes. But she also knew they were a minor species with no real power in galactic politics. They had a handful of colony ships, a few mining operations, and some agricultural settlements. Nothing that mattered. So when the incident happened in Docking Bay 7, Rhea did not think twice about her actions. It was a busy day on the station. Ships were arriving and departing constantly, and the customs checkpoints were crowded with travelers waiting to have their documents checked. Rhea was making her usual rounds, ensuring that her officers were doing their jobs properly, when she heard the sound of running footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a small human child, a female, no more than 6 standard years old by human counting. The child was chasing a small hovering toy, laughing as it floated just out of her reach. She was not looking where she was going. She did not see Rhea standing in her path. The child ran straight into Rhea's ceremonial cloak, leaving a smudge of something sticky on the expensive fabric. In culture, touching an officer's ceremonial garments without permission was a serious offense. It was a sign of disrespect, a challenge to authority. Among her own people, such an act would result in public punishment. The offender would be held down while their social superiors slapped them across the face, reminding them of their place. Rhea did not think. She did not consider that this was a child. She did not consider that humans had different customs. She simply reacted the way she had been trained to react for 40 cycles. She raised her primary appendage and struck the child across the face. The blow was hard enough to send the small human tumbling across the polished floor. The child let out a cry of pain and surprise. Blood began to stream from her nose, bright red against her pale skin. Her hovering toy fell to the ground, forgotten. The docking bay fell silent. Dozens of beings from dozens of species had witnessed what just happened. They all stood frozen, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Rhea looked down at the crying child with cold satisfaction. This was how order was maintained. This was how lesser beings learned their place. The child's parent, whoever they were, would think twice before letting their offspring run wild in a Commerce Authority checkpoint again. Then she heard the voice. "Lily." It was a male human. He had been standing at a merchant's stall 3 sections away, purchasing dried fruits. He was not a large man by human standards, medium height, broad shoulders, hands calloused from manual labor. He wore the simple coveralls of a colony ship worker. Nothing special. Nobody important. He had turned at the sound of his daughter's cry. His eyes found the scene. His child on the ground, blood on her face, Rhea standing over her with the posture of absolute authority. What happened next would be studied in courses for generations. The man did not scream. He did not charge forward in a rage. He did not make any of the threatening displays that Rhea had learned to watch for from aggressive species. He simply went still. It was a different kind of stillness than Rhea had ever seen before. Every muscle in his body seemed to lock into place. His breathing slowed. His pupils dilated until his eyes looked almost black, and something in his face changed, something that made every other species in the docking bay instinctively take a step back. A merchant later described it as watching a mask fall away. "I have seen humans before," he would tell investigators. "I thought I knew what they were, but in that moment I saw something else, something older, something that remembered what it meant to be a hunter on a death world." Then the man smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not even an angry smile. It was something else entirely, something that showed his teeth in a way that triggered ancient prey responses in half the beings present. Several of them would later require counseling to deal with the nightmares. The man walked forward. His movements were slow and controlled, each step deliberate and precise. He knelt beside his daughter and gently lifted her from the floor. He wiped the blood from her face with his sleeve, speaking softly in the human language called English. "It's okay, baby girl, Daddy's here. You're going to be fine." The child wrapped her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. He held her for a moment, stroking her hair, then turned to the merchant who had been standing nearby. "Can you take her to the medical bay?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. "She needs someone to look at her nose. I'll be along shortly. I just need to speak with the commander first." They took the child with trembling appendages. He did not argue. He did not ask questions. He simply hurried away as fast as his legs could carry him. The man turned to face Rhea. She had expected threats. She had expected violence. She was prepared for both. She had faced down species far more dangerous than humans in her career. But the man did neither of those things. He simply stood there, looking at her with those dark eyes, that terrible smile still on his face. Then he spoke, and his words were recorded by 17 different security feeds. "My name is... I'm a hydroponics engineer from the colony ship Perseverance. I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that I was nobody, just a father buying fruit for his daughter." He paused and his smile widened. "Remember my name, Commander. Remember this moment, because what comes next, that's not going to be about me. That's going to be about what we are, all of us. Every human who ever crawled out of the mud and refused to die. You're about to find out why they call our world a death world." Then turned and walked away. He did not run. He did not look back. He simply walked toward the medical bay to be with his daughter. Rhea watched him go. She felt a strange sensation in her chest, something unfamiliar. It took her a moment to recognize it as unease, but she pushed it aside. The human was nobody, just as he had said, a hydroponics engineer on a colony ship. What could someone like that possibly do to her? She laughed and turned to her officers. "Back to work," she ordered. "The incident is over. There's nothing to see here." She did not file a report. The incident was beneath her notice. A minor disciplinary action against a child from a minor species, not worth the paperwork. 3 standard days later, the first human ships began arriving at Station 9. The Galactic Council received the human diplomatic transmission on the morning of the 4th day. It was routed through normal channels, processed by standard bureaucratic procedures, and delivered to the appropriate committee with all the urgency of a routine trade dispute. The message was simple, 5 words: "We are coming to collect." Ambassador L of the hegemony reviewed the transmission during his afternoon briefing. He was a creature of elegant proportions, with silver scales and eyes that held the cold intelligence of a species that had dominated galactic politics for. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had negotiated treaties that shaped the fate of billions, and he found the human message almost amusing. "Collect what exactly?" he asked his aide. The aide checked his. "Unknown ambassador, the message does not specify." L dismissed the matter with a wave of his clawed hand. Humanity was a minor species, barely a footnote in galactic affairs. They had no fleet worth mentioning, no military tradition beyond their primitive world wars, no standing in the halls of power. Whatever they thought they were collecting, it was surely nothing more than posturing from a young species trying to appear more important than they were. Then the ships began to arrive. They came through the jump gate at Station 9 in a steady stream. Not warships. The humans did not have those. These were freighters and cargo haulers, colony transports and mining vessels, personal craft and family shuttles. They poured through the gate like water through a broken dam, one after another after another. The station's traffic control officers watched their screens in growing alarm. Standard protocol allowed for a few dozen arrivals per hour. By the end of the first day, they had logged over 3,000 human vessels. By the second day, that number had doubled. By the third day, the station's tracking systems began to struggle with the sheer volume. Every ship broadcast the same identifier code, DATHWRLDER. Station Commander Rhea watched the arrivals from her command center. She had not slept in 2 days. Her ceremonial cloak, the same one that had been stained by a child's hand, hung in her closet untouched. Every time she looked at it, she remembered Smile. "What do they want?" she demanded of her communications officer. "Why are they here?" "They're not saying, Commander. Every ship we've contacted gives the same response. They're here because they were called." "Called by whom?" "They won't say, or they don't know, it's unclear." The ships did not dock. They simply took up positions around the station, floating in the void like a silent audience waiting for a performance to begin. They did not threaten. They did not block traffic. They did not interfere with station operations in any way. They just waited. The Galactic Council demanded an explanation. The human ambassador, a weathered woman named Director Sarah, appeared before them via holographic transmission. She was not young. Her hair was gray, her face lined with the marks of a long life. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations or medals, but her eyes held something that made even Ambassador L sit up in his seat. "You call our world a death world," she began. "You mean it as a classification, a category in your scientific databases. To you, it is simply a description of the conditions under which our species evolved. But to us, it is something more. It is a name, a reminder of what we survived, and we have decided to wear it with pride." She paused and looked around the council chamber. "That is what we call ourselves now, and do not forget when one of their children is harmed." The council erupted in confusion. What child? What harm? Ambassador L called for order and demanded that the human explain herself. Director smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "I think you should see this," she said. The holographic display shifted. Suddenly, the council chamber was filled with images, security footage from Station 9, captured from 17 different angles. They watched as Commander Rhea struck a 6-year-old human girl across the face. They saw the child fall. They saw the blood. They heard her cry. The footage played on a loop. Again and again the blow landed. Again and again the child fell. The council sat in stunned silence. "Someone uploaded this footage to every major galactic information network," Director continued. "We do not know who. We did not order it. But within hours, every human settlement in the galaxy had seen it, and they responded. She gestured to where the endless stream of human vessels continued to arrive at Station 9. These ships carry no weapons, they carry people. Engineers and farmers, teachers and miners, doctors and artists, families with children of their own. They came from every colony, every station, every outpost where humanity has managed to scratch out a life among the stars. We did not coordinate this. We did not organize it. We did not order it. They simply came. Ambassador L found his voice. You expect us to believe that 40,000 ships arrived spontaneously, without any central command. I expect nothing, Ambassador. I am simply telling you what happened. When humans see one of their children hurt, they do not wait for orders. They do not form committees. They do not debate the proper response. They act. And what action do you intend to take? Another demanded. What do you want? Director's expression did not change. We want to talk to Commander Rhea. We want to explain something to her about our species, about what we are, about what we do when our children are hurt. At that moment, Commander Rhea was barricaded in her quarters on Station 9. Every security officer the station could spare stood guard outside her door. She had called for reinforcements from 3 neighboring systems, but none had arrived. The human ships, though they carried no weapons, had somehow managed to position themselves between the station and every jump gate. No one could get in or out without passing through that silent fleet. And outside Rhea's quarters, in the corridor that led to her door, thousands of humans had gathered. They did not shout. They did not chant. They did not carry signs or weapons. They simply stood there in perfect silence, filling every available space, staring at the door behind which Rhea hid. They had been there for 6 hours. They had not moved. They had not spoken. They had not eaten or slept. They simply waited, their eyes fixed on that door, their faces wearing expressions that made the security officers very, very nervous. This is harassment, Ambassador L declared in the council chamber. This is intimidation. You are attempting to influence the legal process through mob action. We have broken no laws, Director replied calmly. We have threatened no one. We have not damaged any property or harmed any being. We are simply present. Present? The ambassador's voice rose with anger. You have surrounded a sovereign space station with 40,000 vessels. You have filled its corridors with your people. You call this merely being present? Yes, Director's expression remained unchanged. That is exactly what I call it. We are not asking you to do anything, Ambassador. We are not demanding justice from your courts or punishment from your authorities. We are showing you something. We are showing you what we are. She leaned forward slightly. Every species in this council evolved on gentle worlds, worlds where cooperation meant survival, worlds where aggression was costly and compromise was rewarded. You built a galactic civilization on those instincts. It has served you well for millions of years, but it has also made you forget something important. Her voice dropped lower. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived because we learned that some things cannot be compromised, some lines cannot be crossed, some injuries cannot be forgiven. And when those lines are crossed, when those injuries are dealt, we do not form committees, we do not debate, we come together, all of us, and we deal with the problem. The council chamber fell silent. On the human fleet continued to grow. 50,000 ships now, 60,000, the number kept climbing. What do you want? Ambassador L asked again, his voice quieter this time. Director smiled that terrible smile again. We want Commander Rhea to understand, and we want you to understand, and we want every species in this galaxy to understand what happens when you hurt a human child. She paused. We are not warriors, we are not conquerors, we do not seek your worlds or your wealth. We are engineers and farmers and teachers. We are nobodies, but we are nobodies who refuse to let our children be harmed. And when you harm them, we come, all of us. Not because anyone ordered us to, not because anyone organized us, but because that is what we are. That is what evolution on a death world made us. In her quarters, Commander Rhea listened to the broadcast of the council meeting on her personal terminal. Her hands were shaking. The sound of silence from the corridor outside her door was somehow worse than any amount of screaming would have been. She looked at her ceremonial cloak, still hanging in the closet. She thought about Smile. She thought about his words, "Remember my name. Remember this moment. You're about to find out why they call our world a death world." For the first time in 40 cycles of service, Commander Rhea was afraid. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session when the human fleet reached 80,000 vessels. By that point, ships were arriving faster than the station's tracking systems could count them. They filled the void around Station 9 like stars in a dense nebula, their running lights creating a shimmering cloud that could be seen from neighboring systems. Ambassador L demanded that the humans withdraw immediately. He cited 17 different galactic treaties. He threatened economic sanctions. He hinted at military action from the combined fleets of the council members. Director listened patiently to all of it, then she politely declined. "We have broken no laws," she repeated for what must have been the 100th time. "Our vessels have not interfered with station operations. Our people have not committed any acts of violence. We are simply exercising our right to peaceful assembly in neutral space. If you wish to take military action against civilians who have harmed no one, that is your choice. But I suspect you understand what kind of precedent that would set." They understood. If the great powers of the galaxy attacked unarmed human families because those families had gathered to protest an injustice, it would shatter the foundation of galactic law. Every minor species would see it as proof that the Council only protected its own. Every trade agreement, every alliance, every diplomatic relationship would be thrown into question. The humans had trapped them without firing a single shot. Inside Station 9, the silence continued. The human crowds outside Commander Rhea's quarters had grown until they filled every corridor, every walkway, every open space on the station. They stood shoulder to shoulder, young and old, men and women and children. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply watched. The other species on the station, the merchants and travelers who had been caught up in all of this, found themselves unable to look away. Something about the scene was deeply disturbing in ways they could not quite explain. It was not threatening exactly. It was not violent, but it was terrifying nonetheless. A merchant, the same one who had carried little Lily to the medical bay, tried to describe it to his mate later. "They were so quiet," he said. "Thousands of them and not a sound, but their eyes were all the same, like they were all thinking the same thought, like they were all waiting for the same thing. I have never felt so small in my entire life." On the 5th day, the Commerce Authority made a decision. The economic cost of the standoff was becoming untenable. No ships could enter or leave the station. Trade routes were disrupted across 3 sectors. Insurance companies were refusing to cover any cargo that came within a light year of 9. More importantly, they had received reports from their colonies. Human workers had stopped working. Not in protest, they had not quit their jobs or made any demands. They had simply stopped. Every hydroponics engineer, every maintenance technician, every doctor and teacher and construction worker. They had put down their tools and walked away without a word. They discovered to their horror just how dependent their civilization had become on human labor. Systems began to fail. Crops began to die. Medical facilities reported critical staffing shortages, and still the humans said nothing. They simply waited. The Commerce Authority contacted Commander Rhea and informed her that she was being stripped of her rank and recalled for a formal hearing. She would be delivered to the humans so that they could explain whatever they wished to explain. Rhea protested. She cited her years of service, her spotless record, her loyalty to the authority. She argued that she had done nothing wrong. She had simply enforced discipline in accordance with custom. Striking a child who had touched her ceremonial garments was proper protocol. The authority responded with 2 words, "We know." Then they cut the communication. Commander Rhea was brought before the Galactic Council in chains. It was not strictly necessary. She had not resisted when the security officers came to collect her, but they wanted to make a statement. They wanted the humans to see that they were taking this seriously. The council chamber was packed. Representatives from every member species had come to witness the proceedings. Holographic feeds were being broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. This was history in the making, and everyone knew it. The human delegation stood near the front of the chamber. Director was there, along with her staff and security detail. But it was the man standing beside her who drew everyone's attention. Still wore his work coveralls from the Perseverance. He had not changed his clothes since the day of the incident. His face was tired, lined with lack of sleep. His hands, those calloused hands of a hydroponics engineer, hung at his sides. But his eyes were sharp, and when they met Rhea's, she flinched. "Commander Rhea," Director began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "6 days ago you struck a 6-year-old human child. Her name is Lily. She is the daughter of this man." She gestured to. She had committed no crime. She had broken no law. She had simply run into you while chasing a toy. Rhea said nothing. "You struck her hard enough to break her nose. You sent her tumbling across the floor, bleeding and crying. And then you walked away without a second thought, as if she meant nothing, as if her pain was beneath your notice." Still Rhea was silent. Director turned to address the council. "What you have witnessed over the past 6 days, the ships, the crowds, the silence, is not an army. It is not an invasion force. It is a family. A very large family, spread across the stars, who came together when one of their youngest members was hurt." She paused to let that sink in. "Humans are not the strongest species in this galaxy. We are not the or the most advanced. We have no great fleet, no ancient empire, no seat of power in these halls. But we have something that you have forgotten, something that you evolved past long ago on your safe and gentle worlds." Her voice grew harder. "We remember what it means to be pack animals. We remember what it means to protect our young. On our world, where everything wanted to eat us, the only way to survive was to band together, to care for each other, to make sure that every child was everyone's child, because losing even one meant that much less chance for our species to continue." She turned back to Rhea. "You struck a child, our child, any child. In our culture, in our bones, this is not a crime to be weighed and measured. It is not an incident to be filed and forgotten. It is a desecration. It is a violation of the most sacred trust that exists between members of our species." Stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but in the silent chamber, everyone could hear him clearly. "I told you to remember my name," he said to Rhea. "I told you I was nobody, just a father buying fruit for his daughter. I wanted you to understand that this," he gestured at the chamber, at the thousands of humans watching via holographic feed, at the fleet that still surrounded the station. "This is what nobody can summon when you hurt our children." He took another step closer. "I did not organize this. I did not ask for it. I did not even know it was happening until the ships started arriving. But I understand why it happened. Because Lily is not just my daughter. She is everyone's daughter. Every human who ever lived, every human who will ever live, looks at a child and sees the future of our species. And when that future is threatened, we respond. All of us, together." Rhea finally found her voice. "I did not know," she whispered. "I did not understand your customs. Among my people such discipline is expected. I meant no serious harm." "No," agreed. "You did not understand. That is why we came, not to punish you, not to take revenge, but to make sure you understand now, to make sure everyone understands." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of and ambassadors and representatives from 100 different worlds. We are not a warrior species. We do not seek conquest. We do not want your worlds or your wealth or your power. We only want to live in peace and raise our children in safety. But understand this clearly. We come from a world where everything, from the weather to the wildlife to the very bacteria in our blood, tried to kill us. We survived because we learned to protect each other. We learned that the pack is sacred. The family is sacred. The children are sacred. His voice dropped lower, and somehow that made it more frightening. Herd our children again, and we will not need weapons. We will not need armies. We will simply come, all of us, and we will teach you why the galaxy calls our world a death world. The council chamber was silent. The Galactic Council stripped Commander Rhea of her rank and titles. They issued a formal apology to humanity. They established new protocols for interaction with human children, recognizing them as protected under a special category of galactic law. The Commerce Authority quietly paid reparations to the family, not because anyone demanded it, but because they understood what would happen if they did not. But the humans did not leave. They stayed for 3 more days after the verdict. The ships remained in their positions around the station. The crowds remained in the corridors. The silence continued. When Ambassador L demanded to know why they were still there, Director gave him a simple answer. We want to make sure you remember. On the 3rd day, as quietly as they had come, the humans departed. The ships broke formation and returned to their homes across the galaxy. The crowds dispersed, walking back to their vessels without a word. Within hours, Station 9 was back to normal, or as close to normal as it would ever be again. Was one of the last to leave. Before he boarded his shuttle to return to the Perseverance, he stopped by Commander Rhea's former office. She was there, packing her belongings under the watchful eyes of her replacements. He did not speak to her. He did not need to. He simply stood in the doorway for a moment, holding his daughter's hand. Lily's nose had healed. She had a small scar where the blow had landed, but the doctors said it would fade with time. Rhea looked up in Met's eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved, then nodded once, turned, and walked away with his daughter. Rhea watched them go. She would never hold a position of authority again. She would spend the rest of her life as a cautionary tale, an example of what happened when you underestimated the species from the death world. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter. All she could think about was the look in his eyes. Not hatred, not triumph, just a quiet certainty that said, we will always come. No matter how far, no matter how many, we will always come. 40 years later, a diplomat named N asked her human colleague about the 9 incident. She had read about it in her history courses, but she had never quite understood why humanity had reacted so intensely to what was, by galactic standards, a minor assault. The human, a young woman named Dr. Sarah, granddaughter of the girl who had been struck, smiled at the question. She pulled up a photograph on her and showed it to N. It was a picture of Lily, now in her mid-40s, standing with her own children, and behind them was a beautiful garden on one of humanity's newer colony worlds. Everyone was smiling. Because she matters, Doctor said simply. Because they all matter. Because the moment we forget that, the moment we let someone hurt our children without consequences, we stop being human. N looked at the photograph for a long time. She saw the happiness in those faces, the love that bound them together across generations. And she began to understand something that her species had forgotten long ago, something that humanity had never allowed itself to forget. Family was not just blood. It was not just genetics or shared ancestry. Family was a choice, a decision to care for each other, to protect each other, to come together when one of your own was in danger. Humanity had made that choice long ago, on a death world where survival depended on treating every child as precious, every life as worth defending. And they had carried that choice with them to the stars. We are, Doctor said, putting away her, and take care of their own. Anne nodded slowly. She finally understood. And across the galaxy, in council chambers and trading posts and colony ships, other species were beginning to understand as well. The humans were not conquerors. They were not warriors. They were something far more dangerous. They were a family of billions spread across the stars who would drop everything and come running whenever one of their own was hurt. It was, in its own way, the most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever seen. And it was beautiful.